Today we are breaking down everything that happened during Omoyele Sowore's dramatic court appearance. How he ended up in Kuje Correctional Centre. Why his earlier bail was revoked. What happened inside the courtroom. Why the judge granted a fresh 200 million naira bail. Why one of his sureties must be a traditional ruler. Why his passport was seized. What supporters were saying. What the prosecution argued. And why this single court hearing immediately became one of Nigeria's hottest political conversations. Trust me, this story has everything. Politics, law, drama, arguments, unexpected twists, even bail conditions that made many Nigerians scratch their heads and ask, wait, traditional ruler? Did we suddenly switch from a courtroom to a village meeting? So grab your popcorn, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and let's step inside the courtroom. Before we enter the courtroom, we need to rewind the tape, because every Nigerian story comes with previously on. Omoyele Sowore isn't exactly new to the controversy. Whether you support him, disagree with him, or simply know him as that activist who always trends on Twitter, one thing almost everyone agrees on is this: he rarely stays quiet. If Nigeria sneezes, Sowore has probably already posted 3 tweets before everyone else says, bless you. He is the publisher of Sahara Reporters, a former presidential candidate, an activist, and one of the government's loudest critics. For years, he has challenged different administrations, sometimes through protests, sometimes through investigative journalism, sometimes through social media. So when the Department of State Services, better known as the DSS, filed charges accusing him of cybercrime and criminal defamation arising from social media posts referring to President Bola Tinubu as a criminal, many Nigerians immediately knew this case would attract nationwide attention. Sowore denied the allegations and continued to maintain that his comments were protected speech. When Sowore was first arraigned months earlier, the court actually granted him bail. Not just any bail, self-recognizance, meaning the court trusted him enough to release him largely on his own undertaking while the trial continued. Although the judge also cautioned him against making statements capable of inciting the public. For many people, that sounded like good news. Case continues. Everyone goes home. Nigeria continues being Nigeria. Fast forward, a court date arrives. Everyone expects Sowore to appear. The prosecution arrives. Lawyers arrive. Court officials arrive. Journalists arrive. Security officers arrive. Even people who came simply because they heard something interesting was happening arrive. But one very important person doesn't. Sowore. His absence immediately became the biggest issue before the court. The judge had earlier warned that failure to appear could have consequences. Now, if you ever missed an appointment, you know there are levels. Missing your barber, manageable. Missing your dentist, painful. Missing your village meeting, your aunties will remember forever. Missing a federal high court hearing, that's a completely different level. The prosecution wasted no time. Their argument was simple. The defendant had failed to appear. Therefore, the court should act. And the court did. Justice Mohammed Omar revoked Sowore's earlier bail and issued a bench warrant after he failed to attend the scheduled proceedings. That decision immediately changed everything. Within hours, the conversation across Nigeria exploded. Some people argued, the court is only enforcing its rules. Others replied, but why wasn't his explanation accepted? Once the bench warrant was issued, the matter became far more serious. No longer was this simply about missing one court appearance. Now, the court wanted him brought before it. Eventually, Sowore appeared before the court, but instead of walking back home, he was ordered remanded at the Kuje Correctional Centre pending the hearing of his application seeking to suspend the revocation order. Now imagine this, you enter court hoping today's discussion lasts maybe 20 minutes. Next thing, you are heading to Kuje. Nigeria truly teaches people that life can change faster than NEPA takes lights. 1 minute you are checking your phone, the next minute someone says follow the order. The moment news broke, political supporters jumped into the conversation. Civil society organizations issued statements. Legal analysts began discussing constitutional rights. Television stations invited experts. Radio stations opened phone lines. Before long, everybody suddenly became a senior advocate of Nigeria, including that one uncle who still thinks WhatsApp broadcast counts as legal research. Sowore's legal team quickly fought back. They filed applications asking the court to restore his bail and set aside the bench warrant. They also challenged the judge's continued handling of the case, alleging bias. The prosecution opposed those applications. Both sides presented legal arguments before Justice Mohammed Omar. Instead of ruling immediately, the judge reserved his decision, June 30. That would be Judgment Day. And just like that, everyone had 6 days to speculate. Tuesday morning, Abuja, the Federal High Court. Journalists arrived early. Supporters gathered. Lawyers walked into court carrying files thicker than some university textbooks. Security presence increased. Everyone knew today's ruling wasn't just another court date. It would determine whether Sowore remained behind bars or regained his freedom while standing trial. Outside the courtroom, conversations filled the air. Some predicted unconditional bail. Others expected stricter conditions. Some confidently declared, "I already know the judgment," even though they clearly did not. Because if Nigerians had as much confidence during exams as they have predicting court judgments, our universities would have produced Nobel Prize winners every semester. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was serious. Lawyers exchanged greetings. Supporters watched quietly. Journalists prepared notebooks. Cameras waited outside. Every movement suddenly seemed important. Every whisper looked suspicious. Every cough sounded like breaking news. Then Justice Mohammed Omar entered. As is customary, everyone rose. The courtroom settled. The noise disappeared. Now, the moment everyone had been waiting for had arrived. Would Sowore walk free? Would the court maintain its earlier decision? Would new conditions be imposed? For a few moments, only the judge held the answers. Justice Mohammed Omar adjusted the files before him. The courtroom became unusually quiet. Nobody wanted to miss a single word. Even the journalists who had spent the morning scribbling notes slowed down. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would the court maintain its earlier hotline? Would Sowore remain in custody? Or would the court give him another opportunity? For a few seconds, silence. Then the judge began reading his ruling. And almost immediately, everyone realized this wasn't going to be a one-line decision. Every sentence mattered. Every paragraph carried legal weight. The court decided to restore Sowore's bail, but not on the same terms as before. Instead of the earlier self-recognizance arrangement, Justice Omar imposed much stricter conditions. The new bail was fixed at 200 million naira, with 2 sureties in the same amount. One surety had to be a traditional ruler from Sowore's community, while the second had to own verified landed property in Abuja. The court also ordered Sowore to surrender his international passport to the Deputy Chief Registrar until the case is concluded, and directed that the sureties be verified by the prosecution before the bail could take effect. The ruling also cleared the way for Sowore to leave Kuje Correctional Centre once the conditions were fulfilled, and the case was adjourned for the opening of the defense. And just like that, the courtroom atmosphere changed. Supporters who had walked in worried finally had something to smile about. Not because the case had ended, it hadn't, but because Sowore would no longer remain in prison while preparing his defense, provided the bail conditions were met. Now let's address the number everyone was talking about. 200 million naira. The moment that figure hit social media, phones nearly overheated. One person said, "That's not bail, that's a federal budget." Another joked, "At this point, the surety might need a surety." Someone else asked, "Where exactly does one casually find a traditional ruler and an Abuja property owner before lunch?" One question dominated public discussions. Why did the judge move from self-recognizance to such demanding conditions? Legally, bail is intended to ensure that an accused person returns to court. It is not supposed to amount to a conviction. At the same time, courts are permitted to impose conditions they believe will reasonably secure the defendant's attendance. The judge's earlier concern centered on Sowore's failure to appear at a previous hearing, which had led to the revocation of his initial bail. From the court's perspective, stricter terms could be seen as a way of preventing another missed appearance. Whether those conditions were reasonable or excessive quickly became the subject of public debate. Of all the conditions, one stood out: a traditional ruler. Then came another condition. Sowore was ordered to deposit his international passport with the court, pending the determination of the case. Again, this was not unusual in high-profile criminal proceedings. Courts often require defendants to surrender travel documents where there is concern that they could leave the country before trial concludes. After the ruling, Sowore addressed supporters and journalists. Among the comments that attracted attention was his remark that the authorities had always been after his passport, adding that they would deal with that issue when the time came. He also maintained his defiant political posture despite the fresh bail. Conditions. Whether one agreed with him or not, it was clear that the legal battle had not changed his willingness to speak publicly. It is important to remember something. Granting bail does not determine whether someone is guilty or innocent. Bail simply concerns whether the accused should remain in custody while the case continues. The substantive trial was scheduled to proceed with the opening of the defense after the bail ruling. That means the allegations themselves still have to be tested in court. Evidence will be presented, arguments will be made. The prosecution bears the burden of proving its case. The defense has the opportunity to challenge that case. Ultimately, only the court can determine the outcome. If there was one lesson learned from this entire episode, it is this: courtrooms may not have explosions, they may not have superheroes, they may not have dramatic background music, but they can produce some of the most gripping real-life stories imaginable. One missed appearance, one revoked bail, a remand in Kuje, days of uncertainty, then a fresh ruling, 200 million naira bail, a traditional ruler, an Abuja property owner, a surrendered passport, and a courtroom that once became the center of national attention. That is how quickly legal proceedings can reshape the political conversations in Nigeria. Whether you admire Sowore or strongly disagree with his politics, this case is a reminder that the justice system operates through procedures that can have enormous consequences for public figures and ordinary citizens alike. The court will continue hearing the matter. The prosecution will continue presenting its case. The defense will continue responding. And Nigerians, as always, will continue watching. Sometimes carefully, sometimes passionately, and sometimes with enough memes to keep the internet entertained for weeks. Only time will tell how this case ultimately ends. But one thing is certain: the hearing that resulted in Sowore's fresh 200 million naira bail will be remembered as one of the most closely watched courtroom moments in recent Nigerian political history. If you found this breakdown informative, and you enjoy in-depth documentaries that explain the stories behind Nigeria's biggest headlines, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends and family.